What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another post-game show here on Mets Central as the Mets get smacked around by the Atlanta Braves, which is, another reason why. Case in point proven why after last night we were not rolled back in. We didn't really have any feel one way or the other. Just horrible game. We were in attendance for it, unfortunately. An hour, 45-minute rain delay to start off the night, which already made things very frustrating to begin with. And then on top of that, you get a baseball game where it looked like the Mets were going to just walk away with this one after annihilating Carlos Carrasco, who looked like he was on the verge of just getting retiring in the middle of the game, honestly. And then in the fourth inning, David Peterson with a 6-run lead, going out there, walking multiple batters, the bottom part of the order nonetheless, allowing a couple of runs, and the Mets blow a 6-0 lead, which is pretty much on status quo, I guess you could say, for on brand, whatever you want to say, for how the Mets have been playing baseball lately. Let's talk about though. Leave a like on your way in if you guys are watching live, or if you're watching on replay. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, to turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on Met Central. But just an inexcusable performance, and this is why we've said here a couple times this team's not winning a championship this year, because you have your starting pitchers going out there and giving these kind of performances game after game. And I don't want to hear about the rain delay. You cannot walk 5 batters, and you cannot walk as many batters as you did up 6-0 against that part of the Braves lineup. And then the offense, where were they after Carlos Carrasco was out of the game? Where'd the offense go? Embarrassing.
Ooh, yeah, that was a rough one. It was a rough one. Doesn't help the fact, that we were actually in attendance and had to wait an hour and 45 just for the rain to stop and for them to, fix the field before they could actually get going, before they could actually throw the first pitch. And I mean, look, like you said, the game started out well. The game started out well because, for the first 2 innings, Peterson looked pretty sharp, was getting a couple swings and misses. Majority of his outs were coming on ground balls, and the offense picked up on where they were last night. They exploded for a couple runs off Spencer Strider, knocked them out early, and then the first 2 innings they looked really good, and they did what they were supposed to do against Carlos Carrasco. We've talked about it many times before on this, on the streams, on the podcast, on the post game recaps that we do. It's like when you face a bad pitcher like this, you have to go out there. You got to tee off on him, and you got to get him out of the game early as possible to get to that bullpen. And not that the Braves have had a good bullpen this year, because really their whole team hasn't been great at all this year, but at least make them burn bullpen arms so that for tomorrow, if you're in a position to sweep, they're throwing out there, basically their lower leverage guys, because, they basically used all their top guys, in these last 2 games. And like I said, started well. You had Pete Alonso with a big 2-run single. You had Cedric Mullins hitting a sacrifice fly. Juan Soto hits a 2-run home run, which is a very nice home run to center field. McNeil chips in another run, and they're up 6-0. And then, so they get to the top of the third, and you start to see a bit of regression from Peterson, because he ends up getting the first out, then gives up back-to-back singles, records the second out, walks Marcell Ozuna, so base loaded, 2 outs, but gets out the inning. And basically all of us are saying, okay, Peterson had a shaky inning, but you know what? You got through it, settle down now, go out there and pitch a couple more innings, get the 6 innings, and then, get the bullpen in this game, and then let's shut her down. And then the fourth inning comes, and it's just walk after walk after walk after walk, and a couple of base hits sprinkled in there. Obviously, you had Jerks and Profar basically, because the first run the Braves scored ended up coming off a walk, and then, Profar just ends up hitting a double down the left field line to make it a 6-4 game. And then, Reed Garrett comes in again. He can't throw strikes. And we were both saying it, and we set it up afterwards because we didn't say it in the moment, but I think we all knew when Michael Harris came up with the bases loaded, we knew something bad was going to happen, Now, we didn't say necessarily it was going to be a grand slam, but, a 2-run double into the gap, maybe a bases clearing double. But, Michael Harris just ends up silencing all City Field with, hitting a grand slam into dead center field. And at that point, the wheels came off the bus because you let up 9 runs in the top of the fourth. And then, you're basically going out there, you're trotting out Paul Blackburn to eat innings, I guess. I mean, yeah, he ends up giving up 2 home run, or not the 2 home runs, but he gives up 2 runs later in the game off Ozuna 2-run home run. But then, like you said, where'd the offense go? Because at that point, you're only down 9-6, right? And there's been plenty of examples. And I recall a game earlier in the year. I believe the Cubs and the Diamondbacks were playing, and I think the Diamondbacks had like an 8-run inning late in the game, and then the Cubs ended up responding with an 8-run inning of their own. It's like, again, it's like, listen, I get that you did what you were supposed to do against Carrasco, and even to me, I can't really fully applaud that because that's what you should be doing to Carlos Carrasco. This lineup is being paid that amount of money, so they should be teeing off a guy like that who's basically on the verge of retiring. But then, like we said, you go down 9-6, and the offense just disappeared and ended up going nowhere, and they lose this game 11-6. And listen, we've said it multiple times, but we know how this team reacts to bad losses. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose tomorrow, lose the series. And I can't lie, I won't be surprised if they end up going on another 8-game losing streak, because this is the pattern that we've seen throughout this team, especially over the last 2 months. They just, for some reason, they can't recover from bad losses. It gets to them, it gets in their heads, and then it's just one spiral after the other. And I mean, listen, and one more thing before I throw it back to you. Listen, we always say it after bad losses that, that quote unquote, this bad loss is the worst loss of the season. I think this does apply to this loss, because when you blow a 6-0 lead, and especially you give up 9 runs in 1 inning to lose that game, yeah, to me, this is the worst loss of the year easily.
And the sad part is, it's like, in my mind, I was like, David Peterson's on the mound. You're up 6-0. There's no way you're going to lose this game. And then you see him struggle in the 3rd inning. It's like, okay, he's probably not going to go as far as you'd like him to, but at the very least, he got out of that bases loaded jam. At the very least, you're probably getting 5 innings still from him. No, couldn't even get that. Now the Reds are only 1 game back as well, by the way. That's another thing of note after tonight. But yeah, I mean, in the 4th inning, they had traffic on the bases with 2 outs, and Pete Alonso gets sent questionably on that play there. Again, I don't get it. You could have had the bases loaded there, but I guess also, do you trust Cedric Mullins at a bases loaded spot? That's the only other thought process maybe you have there. And then, even in the 5th inning, you had 2 guys on with 2 outs again, and nope, you don't get it done. And it's just completely pathetic. I'm not with this whole thing, though. Like, I can't blame Mendoza for tonight.
No.
Reed Garrett, whether you like him or not, he has to execute. Simple as that. He's got to execute. And if this is true, that they're teeing off of his cutter that much, then that's a Reed Garrett thing. I don't blame Mendoza for Reed Garrett utilizing his cutter there. Is Jeremy Hefner not relaying that information? And on top of that, again, it's like, how do you want to get all these outs that you had remaining in the game? Garrett was going to be the first guy in. What'd you want to do? Go to Rogers there? Probably too early for Rogers. Like, Garrett would have been in this game at some point anyway. The only argument I could, maybe see with Reed Garrett is they should have had Soto maybe come into the game to face Michael Harris. But even then, I don't know if he was available. So it's like, could you have gone to him? So there really wasn't much Mendoza could do. Because if he didn't go to Garrett there, Garrett was going to come in at some point. And if it wasn't going to be Garrett, then Stanek would have had to come in. And neither are good options. So I can't blame Mendoza for your starting pitcher not giving volume once again. for Reed Garrett not executing. And you know what, Paul Blackburn, even though he allowed that home run, he ate innings, which is something that it's embarrassing that their longer relievers are eating more innings than their starters. It's pathetic. And sure, could have gone to Raleigh. But again, as you're going throughout the game, you're telling me there's not a spot where Reed Garrett's, like, you're telling me that Reed Garrett wasn't going to need to be used. And I think Raleigh, ideally, they would have wanted him to go against Olsen at some point. And that's too early for that spot. I can't blame Mendoza for that. I'm sorry.
No, I have no reason to blame Mendoza there. Listen, we've gotten on Mendoza a lot for his bullpen decisions, but that's not one of the times. If you want to blame someone, blame David Pearson for losing all of his control in the fourth inning. Because again, I don't understand what the problem is with this rotation specifically, but for whatever reason, whenever any of these pitchers get to the fourth inning, it's like they completely just lose their stuff. We've seen it with Sanga, we've seen it with Holmes, we've seen it with Montas, seen it with Peterson. Peterson less so, but still, but it still hurts you, especially when all your other guys are not giving you length. And then when the one guy who actually is giving you length then doesn't give you length in this start particularly, then it's like, it ends up hurting you. But no, that's simply down to Peterson just lost all of his control in the fourth inning, was walking batter after batter, and then Reed Garrett has to be better. That is as simple as that. You're quote unquote one of the top reliable relievers in this bullpen, and the fact that you came in, couldn't throw strikes, and your stuff was hittable, again, that's on you. And like the thing you brought up, Armand, like if opposing batters are hitting 333 off Reed Garrett's cutter, then where's Jeremy Hefner to go to him and say, like, listen to Reed, your cutter hasn't looked as sharp as it was. Maybe cut back a little bit on that. Maybe start using your four seamer a little bit more. Start using the sweeper or the splitter a little bit more. Let's cut back on the cutter usage just a little bit until you get more of a feel and more of a control on it. So, but again, this is something that we criticize about this team, that this team isn't coached well. They aren't. Hitting wise, they aren't coached well. Pitching wise, they started out the year great, and last year they were great, but really the pitching has regressed. And then same could be said on the base pass, because again, and apart from Richardson as the first base coach, who does a great job, again, I have to question Mike Sarba, because he's had a couple of third base coach blunders in terms of not sending guys and then either sending guys, because you go back a couple of games ago to the whole Tyrone Taylor thing. Realistically at that point, you're trying to win the game. Tyrone Taylor should have been sent. But in this situation where you have first and second, you have Pete Alonso, a guy that's not known for his speed at all. You have then Starling Marte hit a shallow single, and I get that it was 2 outs, it was 3-2, so Pete was running on the pitch anyway. But from where we were sitting, we could clearly see when Marte hits that ball into right field, Eli White is picking up the ball to throw it as Pete Alonso was rounding third base. So he was dead by a country mile. And I said right when Eli White threw that ball to Sean Murphy, who the catcher for the Braves, I'm like, yeah, Pete's out. He's dead. He's dead at home. There's no way he's scoring on this play. And again, it doesn't make any sense where that's not the right time to be aggressive. You're down 9-6. You're down by 3 runs. So realistically, that run is not the end all and be all. And listen, I get that this team has struggled with runners in scoring position, and I'm not saying there's a good chance that Cedric Mullins is going to come through and hit a single or a double into the gap and bring in a couple runs. But I rather take my chance with Cedric Mullins at the plate than having Pete Alonso trying to beat a throw to home with his lack of speed. So again, the coaching is just such a big issue, along with the fact that this team is just not playing well at all right now.
It's just poor fundamentals across the board. And Gary said on the broadcast tonight, this is the first time ever in Mets history they've won 4+ run leads in 3 straight games. This is why his team's not cut out to win a championship this year. This is why Matt and I have been, we feel pretty safe. And honestly, again, like if we're wrong, great. I'd rather be wrong about it. But this is why we feel safe saying this team's not a championship caliber team. Because you cannot do this against the good teams. Because you're losing against a bad team tonight. You do this against the Dodgers in a wild card series. Early exit. The Padres, early exit. Cubs, Brewers, Phillies. I don't care who it is. Do not care what team it is. You are not winning a championship when your starters are giving you absolutely nothing in terms of volume, when your base running is as poor as it is, when you're blowing leads left and right, and when after a starter gets pulled, okay, cool, you beat up on a starter. Could you get to the bullpen? Because the Braves, they were able to formulate all these outs from their bullpen. Not one earned run against. Mets can have the same with a 6-run lead. It's embarrassing. That like this is not a playoff team. Like forget championship. Does not seem like a playoff team. I don't care about what they did yesterday. I really do not care about the 13 runs. You needed to follow it up with a statement. You needed to sweep this series. You need to at least win the series, which they still could do. But when you continue to lose games like this, no. I don't need to see more to know you're not cut out for a championship.
I don't even think they make the playoffs at this point,
Neither do I.
considering how because remember they got to play the Phillies next week or in 2 weeks. So there's a Philly series coming up, but they're going down to Washington. Washington has been a good team, but typically, and especially in that ballpark in Nationals Park, they usually don't play well. The Mets. Then they head to Atlanta next week. We all know how those games usually go. And then you look at the schedule. And also after this series, they play one of the hottest teams in baseball right now in the Seattle Mariners. So who also have one of the best pitching staffs in baseball and have a ton of weaponry, which they loaded up on. They loaded up on at the trade deadline. And then you got the Rangers. You got to play. You know I think even in September they have to go to Philadelphia one more time to play. So it's not looking good for them. And then they got to play the Reds too again. And this time it's going to be in Cincinnati, and that's going to be a big series because right now, I mean, not even saying that the Mets are even going to come down to the last week like what we saw last year, but if you don't win that series, the Reds have the tiebreaker over the Mets. So, listen, we can only say so many times where it's like, okay, you have to turn it around now, but eventually it's going to get to a point where it's just too late. And it's getting to that point where it's too late because you're not getting. I'm not saying that you get no production, but you get inconsistent production because one night it will be the offense doesn't show up. One night it will be the starting pitching doesn't show up. One night's the bullpen doesn't show up. And when you can't get none of these things to mix together, you're going to keep losing games like they are right now.
They have 2 wins in all of August, 2 wins since July 28th. I really don't care. Like this is who they are, and it goes beyond just the month of August. It goes beyond, the last few games in July as well. They have shown for 2-3 months now, especially. You could even date it back to May if you wanted to, but especially since June, they have shown this is more who they are. And it's just, again, it's absolutely pathetic. Yeah. And I would have loved Crochet. Crochet's not saving us. No. Crochet's not saving this team.
Even if we wanted Crochet, which we did because we were the last, we were one of the front runners to land Crochet, didn't have the prospect ammo to land them. The Red Sox beat us in that, so can't do nothing about that.
Forget about that. Even if Crochet was here, like I was going to say, This team doesn't score enough runs for Garrett Crochet. What about the rest of the rotation? No one gives volume, and the one guy that usually gives volume didn't give it tonight, which only makes this even worse. Because the whole reason I was okay with, you know, when I thought the Mets were going to have to use their high leverage arms yesterday, the reason I was okay with going through it is because Peterson's going. Like, this is the only guy that gives volume. Tomorrow, Senga's not going to give you anything. Montas gives you nothing. Holmes. No, I mean, none of them just give you enough.
No.
It's
And then
horrible.
and then you mix that with the fact that the offense, which has been a problem the whole year, but more specifically at the start of the year, where the starters and the bullpen had to be so pitch perfect to where these guys are being run down, and then this is the result that you're seeing. This is the result that you're seeing now, where the stars aren't giving you any length. The guys that you trusted upon earlier in the year, they're starting to break down, and then even the guys that they traded for, I'm not saying it's all their fault, but Helsley has had his blown ups here and there. Tyler Rogers has had a blown up here and there. Diaz has had a blown up here and there. So and then you look at Gregory Soto, he had that one blown up in the first game in San Diego. So it's just, again, like, everything is, how do I put it? Everything's kind of like meshing over each other, and it's just one overlaps into the other, and then it's one domino effect where it's just like one gets worse, then it falls up to the next category, and then to the next category, and it's not a sustainable way to play baseball, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah. It's just that simple. Like, where is it? 27 blown leads. I mean, forget about. It's unrealistic to say, oh, but they should have won all of them. They're gonna blow leads, but half of them, and they have the best record in baseball. Half. But heaven forbid as well, the offense steps up when they blow a lead and rallies back. Heaven forbid that happens. It's just, it's pathetic. And this is longer than a stretch at this point, Luke. That's the problem.
Yeah, a stretch is like 1-2 weeks at most. This is 2.5 months of poor baseball. Ever since that first bad stretch in June after they swept the Rockies and Nationals, and they had that little win streak here and there with the 7 games, where they swept the Angels, they swept the Giants, but really, and even in those games, did they play well? Did they really play well in those games? No, not really. It was more the same that we saw at the start of the year, where it was the pitching that carried them, and then the offense sprinkled in some runs here or there. But for for the last 2.5 months, they have not been playing winning baseball. Simple as that.
Then I guess we'll see how McLean does Saturday. That's about all that I really could hang my hat on for excitement going forward, is watching him. But I guess, will he give volume at this rate? I don't know. It's just completely garbage. But do you have anything else to add before we wrap things up here?
I don't know. Just win tomorrow, I guess, even though it's probably not going to happen. They're going to lose a series, but yeah, I guess prove us wrong, like we always say.
Yeah, that's all we could say. Have a good night, everyone.